So, happy Monday. President Biden announced the reappointment of Jay Powell as Federal Reserve Chair and the new appointment of Lael Brainard as Vice Chair. Ms. Brainard is currently a governor of the Federal Reserve Board, and here's my takeaway from the president's speech. Basically, I think he said, Jay, you're my guy, because in our conversations, you have promised to maximize employment, to make climate change a top priority, and in your speech a month ago where you said how hard the Fed would work to solve entrenched inequities. Biden also mentioned standing up to Donald Trump, and I'm going to have something to say about that later in this riff. But here's what Mr. Biden really did not say. Jay, inflation is the #1 economic problem in the country today. Rising inflation, which is a tax on everyone, particularly the middle class, can only be curbed by the Fed pressing down on the monetary brake. And the sooner you all move to stop inflation, why, the better off we'll all be. Problem is, that's not what the president said. He did mention inflation, but really in the context of how his $5 trillion big government socialist plan will curb inflation, which is a view that basically no one outside the White House agrees with. What I think the Fed should do right now, frankly, is end quantitative easing. No more asset purchases. Stop stuffing the economy with excess money, free money, cheap money that it doesn't want or need. And then the Fed should get ready to raise their short-term target rate this coming January. That's what they should do. But that is not what Mr. Biden suggested they do. He says, keep your eye on employment, climate change, inequity. And guess what that spells? Plenty of easy money is on the way. The appointment of Ms. Brainard is, of course, a sop to the woke progressive left. Ms. Brainard will push hard for climate change policies and heavier regulations on financial companies and various inequities in the labor force and perhaps elsewhere, and new diversity at the Fed. Not what you'd call a hard money gal. By the way, in congressional testimony, this is an oddity, Ms. Brainard has repeatedly refused to answer a direct question as to whether she believes in capitalism or socialism. Well, how hard can it be for a former Treasury official and longtime Fed official, how hard can it be to come out in favor of American capitalism? Well, I guess in her case, it's very hard. Texas Congressman Roger Williams, who's the guy who asked her on several occasions, will be with us later in the show. Now, after the dust clears with Powell and Brainard, and I reckon they will both be confirmed by the Senate, there'll still be 4 unfilled seats on the Federal Reserve Board. One of them's vice chair for regulation, and then there'll be 3 others. Now, you can bet that the White House figures leave Republican Powell in there, but in addition to Ms. Brainard, let's load up the truck with a bunch of people devoted to woke climate change and diversity and inequality, focusing on employment, not inflation. In other words, no, inflation is not really going to. So lots of it came up today. Stocks rallied. The S&P hit a new record. The Dow was up. All right. I fear easier money. They're going to get plenty of easier money. We'll all pay the piper for rising inflation, but not just yet. So stocks are, in the short run, loves easy money. Now, last point. This business of Jay Powell standing up to former President Trump, which Biden mentioned at his presser today. Now, as I've said before, I know Jay. I like Jay. I had many lunches and meetings with him while I was in office. And with the choice between Jay Powell and Ms. Brainard, I have said publicly many times that I favored Jay Powell. But in policy terms, let me raise this. Jay Powell hiked the Fed's target interest rate 4 times in 2018. This, despite the fact that there was no palpable inflation. Indeed, the average inflation rate in 2018 and 2019, following the Trump tax cuts of 2017, the average inflation rate was about 1.5%. And Mr. Powell raised rates 4 times. He tightened 4 times. Now, today, with inflation over 6%, Powell won't raise rates at all. I don't get that. There's an inconsistency there, is there not? And remember, the economy was booming after the Trump tax cuts. I mean, we had 4 quarter changes running over 4% growth, and that was without inflation and with record low unemployment. In fact, for a fellow who has said he's worried about maximizing employment and ending inequity, it was very odd that during President Trump's term, minority unemployment hit 50-year lows. Blacks, Hispanics, women, Asians, and so forth. The poverty rate fell. Average blue-collar family income soared. Inequality declined with no inflation. Go figure. And President Trump, who was an experienced investor and businessman who followed markets carefully, was furious at those tightenings. And I think he had a right to be furious. This was an unreasonable and mistaken Fed policy. Now, finally, after the Fed induced a big slowdown in the economy with their rate hikes, well, then they had a 180-degree turn and started cutting rates 3 times in July, September, and October of 2019. And lo and behold, the tax cut, deregulated economy started to roar back. All this until the pandemic came crashing down. Then in early March, worried about COVID, the Fed cut its rates a little bit. And then a week later, the Fed unexpectedly moved its target rate all the way down to near zero. And it was the correct policy. Now, that news was delivered to President Trump while he was speaking in the White House press room. I was sitting there along the wall in the room. I can't remember exactly who whispered it to the president, but it happened, I think, while he was talking or maybe just before he got on the podium. And then, when Mr. Trump got the news, he looked up with a smile and said something to the effect, wow, the Fed just went to zero. I now designate Jay Powell with the Most Improved Player of the Year award. So look, Mr. Trump was even-handed. He criticized the Fed, and then he praised the Fed. That's what presidents for time immemorial have done, because they're president. So just let me conclude. Save America, kill the bill, and conquer inflation, Mr. Powell. It's kind of on you.